It's just not doing anything. Hello, good morning. Welcome to 2025 and welcome to Coffee, Buses and Politics. The four of us are back together again for a preview of what is coming up in politics, mostly in Cambridgeshire, in 2025. How is everyone?
Good, thank you. Loving being back at work, obviously.
Yes, same from yesterday. Have you started the? Yes, yesterday, Stephen, our lieutenant.
Yeah, but I'm not in the office this week, so I'm working from home still. But next week, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get into the office is going to be fun.
Exciting.
It's that time of year where my wife drives to work, and you have to get up a bit earlier every morning to take the ice off the car.
Not if you've got an electric car, because you can tell it to put the heating on nice and early, so that's not a problem. And so I'd never have to face that. But that's
do you know our car's got a really interesting system of air conditioning. It's got these panels at the side of the car, and they're transparent. And if you want them to go up and down, there's a thing, and you go like that, and they go up and down.
Never had one of those.
So, do you really have to do that? How old is your car?
It's not that old. It's got electric windows in the front, but in the back they're manual.
Okay, I'll forgive you for that. That's all right.
Yeah.
I thought you'd got your old Model T out again.
I don't like these modern cars. You say no. It's yeah. No, it's. I'm sure this is what everybody wanted to listen to. No, it's a Suzuki Ignis, and it is. You know,
I think you're better off with a Model T.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't really drive. Alice really likes it. You can fold the seats down and put a lot of stuff in the back. So for the sort of 3,000 miles that we drive a year or whatever it is, it's you know, works for us.
I can't say
anyway.
I drive a Renault Scenic, so
yeah.
Well, you can always take the bus. Like yesterday, I looked out the window, and indeed, like most of the cars were like frozen. And unless you have a car like Stephen's, then you think like, okay, should I spend 10 minutes on this, or should I just take the bus from Hinchinbrook?
You know, I was sort of doing my end of year, looking at the bank balance thing. The single item I bought the most often in 2024 was £1.80, which is the cost of a bus ticket on the B from home into Huntingdon Town Centre or back. So that's my exciting 2024, and I'm sure everybody who's tuned in is fascinated by the discussion so far. We were going to do a preview of 2025. Although I think before we start, I'm gonna show off a little bit, or so I'm not sure show off is the word. I did a thing over the Christmas break because I got bored on my birthday, and let's see if I can make it work. And which is, and I'm going to add it to the stage. I did a tube map style thing of all the bus services from Huntingdon. So that is a sort of diagram of the buses, which initially looks quite good until you realise that, you know, one of those routes runs once per month. One of them is once per week, or, you know, so
Once a month.
Yeah,
It's not even market day frequency.
no, it's the VL14, which is Villager minibus, and it goes from Felmersham. It's the green line in the bottom left to Huntingdon and St Ives. I think it's a monthly thing for people in some Bedfordshire villages to have a day out in Huntingdon or St Ives. It's quite interesting to do because I mean, the bus network is quite complicated, but it really is really frustrating when you look at it. The number of buses that could easily stop at Huntingdon bus station, which is near the town centre, and Huntingdon train station, but don't, because they need rerouting and because frankly they screwed up the regeneration thing there. Anyway, that's and some bus routes are very bizarrely complicated. Anyway, if anybody wants a copy of that, it's on my website at davidlandandcole.com, and that is enough of that. 2025, what's coming up in 2025?
Elections again.
Don't complain. People are complaining they might not go ahead. So actually reading there was a nice BBC summary article yesterday saying that the county council elections are confirmed to go ahead, although it did had a caveat to this. It did say that until 2029 the shape of the authority might change. So they did say that it might change until then, so we might look at the shorter term, but it's not clear yet. What it is clear, well, at least according to what's in the media, is that we'll go ahead on the 1st of May. It just might be a bit shorter than the 4 years, depending on what happens with devolution.
Yeah, the for a candidate, the ROI, if it's going to be, say if it was 2 years, the ROI, and I guess that is the case sometimes in Cambridge City and places, but the return of investment on a candidate in terms of you campaign quite hard to get elected, don't you? It's a bit of a job, and then to only have to do it for 2 years seems a bit like not so good this time.
Hopefully we'll know more detail before the 1st of May. I think the county council still have a few days or so to respond initially to government, and of course they will have more time after to look at some of the details on unitary authorities or on boundaries and so on and so forth. But yes, just to say to anyone who was perhaps concerned that the elections might not go ahead, they are. So saying that, what happens quite soon now in 2025 is candidates start campaigning. I mean, some candidates started campaigning more or less formally before the new year, but now most parties will select candidates officially in the next few weeks or so, and most people will start campaigning, usually before March time at the very least, obviously in the short campaign. So we'll see a lot more campaigning across Cambridgeshire.
The one thing I'd say is I know it's difficult, and I've no bones about this difficult, and some of it is going to be awkward for some people because of the change that might be involved in whatever Cambridgeshire might look at in future with a unitary structure. I hope across Cambridgeshire that we are able to find a solution for ourselves rather than have one imposed. And that does mean difficult decisions. And you know my view about Huntingdonshire, that I sadly think Huntingdonshire might end up getting split into, whether it's in halves or how it works, but it sort of doesn't make sense for Yaxley to be included in Cambridgeshire when there's going to be, if there's going to be a revised Peterborough unitary as an example. But I hope politicians in Cambridgeshire can sit around a table and come up with a solution. Recognising that this is needed, but there is no perfect answer. I hope that's where we go with this, but I have my doubts.
So am I right in thinking that the reforms are going to be more basically within existing boundaries? So they might be splitting up Cambridgeshire. I'm thinking in terms of Peterborough. This is something we've mentioned before, where Peterborough would probably need to be or there's an argument for Peterborough extending into Lincolnshire and North Northants.
I don't think that will happen, although North Northants is interesting, because obviously neither North Northants or West Northants on their own, which are relatively new unitaries, are big enough under the criteria that was set by Angela Rayner. So how North Northants work themselves, and there is a suggestion that, as an example, West Northants will end up going into a Thames Valley thing with Bucks and Milton Keynes. So I don't know, but from my perspective, it needs to be broadly around travel to work areas, because that's makes some of the things like economic growth and stuff happen. That, you know, that's never a perfect answer, or there's never a perfect solution around that. But I don't think there's any suggestion, as an example, that any of the existing districts have to be kept as a single entity.
So, because I guess I suppose what I'm saying is I wonder. So I think going to unitaries around here would be an improvement, just because of the complexity we've got, particularly in local government, in politics in Cambridgeshire. But I wonder if this is sort of possibly. I wonder if we'd be better off doing a complete sort of reset, you know, almost going back to a Redcliffe Maud style thing, and looking at everything, you know, from the start, to deal with things like Peterborough, and where, you know, existing county boundaries don't actually work anymore. I don't know. I mean,
there is a lot of sense in it for Cambridgeshire, because obviously we've got the Newmarket thing as well, which is a bizarre situation where you've got that bit of Newmarket that pokes into Cambridgeshire, and you know, when you look at the map, it doesn't belong. And Newmarket, as historically, has switched between Cambridgeshire and Suffolk in the past anyway. So to me, you know, the thing is, rather than looking at existing boundaries and existing things, why not sit down with a map and just go and just say, you know, if we started from scratch and drew it now, what would we draw it like? I don't think that's going to happen, though. That'll take too long.
Yeah, I suppose the other thing is that given this needs to happen, or, you know, the government wants this to happen quickly, and the amount of money available just for stuff is limited, I understand the logic of going for something that you can do more quickly and hopefully won't be as disruptive. But I do wonder if it's, well, it would still be an improvement, but I do worry it's a missed opportunity.
I guess whatever we get is going to be there for a long time, isn't it? So we're, you know, 1974, the last lot was implemented.
The last serious lot, yeah.
Yeah, so that's 50, that's almost as old as me, 51 years. And so it does make sense to get it right, but everything seems really rushed. So I do admire the intention of sorting out what is a complete mess, but you have to do it right. And I think, you know, from elected, I'm elected at 2 councils, and really at the moment I've had, I mean, it happened just before Christmas, I guess, but I've had no input at all into those decisions. And I guess the county council, which is probably the one with the most to lose, is going to be carrying the bag on lots of these decisions. But who makes them, and how they're made, and how much democratic input into them is an unresolved question so far.
I mean, it has to be. Ideally, it should be agreed by politicians before it's submitted to government.
Yeah, but do politicians never agree anything?
Well, no, absolutely. You know, there is a history of that in Cambridgeshire, and you know, it's one of the things that I feel about the mayoralty now, is the mayoralty is actually able to move forward without some of that stuff going on for the first time in a long time. You know, and you know, there is a question about, you know, what's going to happen to St Neots, but also within some of the district councils, there's some real talent, both in terms of councillors. That'll work itself out through selections and whatever as you look to new boundaries, but also amongst officers. And you know, there's how do you fit some of that talent into a new structure and make it work? I think is really, really important. And I'm gonna flatter Huntingdonshire again, and you know, I would sit Michelle Sachs right bang in the middle of that. and just say, if Huntingdonshire is split in half, where does that leave Michelle Sachs? And I probably shouldn't mention her name because she's an officer, but where does that leave somebody like that who is very talented and is just seems to be left in the middle of somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of people's jobs at stake as well. As the other thing,
Yeah.
So there's lots of employees, but I mean, in all of these conversations, I think we have to put residents first. I think Michelle and everybody else would agree with that as well. But there's going to be some difficult conversations for sure.
Yeah. And I think that the thing is, it is going to be disruptive, and it will take a while to for the benefits to be realized, and there are going to be problems. While I think it is good, I think the result, even what we're looking at, will be better. People are going to be really frustrated for years while you're getting all the computer systems to get set up or whatever.
And there's never going to be a solution that's perfect. And as soon as this is implemented, within 3, 4, 5 months, you're going to get some residents blaming all their ills on the unitary. But I mean, that's second nature to a certain degree. And we have to accept that what we're looking for is the best option, not the perfect option, because the perfect option doesn't exist.
No, I agree, and you want, like I said, I do think it would be an improvement. I do, and I get the desire to do it is so that also you can improve the delivery of. Sorry, I'm doing this thing I always do and just warbling and taking far too long to say anything, which I know is really annoying, but. Given how big a project it is, I wonder if it would make sense to do it a bit more slowly or a bit differently, or maybe not even more slowly, but to look at something a bit bigger. The question I have is if we have, let's say we basically on the lines of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough as we have it at the moment, we have North Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire as 2 unitaries, and the district councils go away.
Mm-hmm.
What is the mayoralty for?
Well, the mayoralty then gets a lot more power, and a major role of those authorities is to hold the mayoralty to account. They're not going to be doing everything, but the mayoralty will be doing a lot more. That's my understanding of it. So the mayoralty, as an example, will be doing strategic planning, and that's about time. To be honest, the more strategic planning we get, the better we can plan the infrastructure that's needed for Cambridgeshire. Personally, I prefer an East of England regional plan, but some sort of strategic plan. I think. As an example, with the mayoralty would be great. I'd also like to see the mayoralty take on the police and crime commissioner role. We've talked about that before here.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the intention of this whole revamp, isn't it? I think it's explicitly stated that there's that opportunity.
It turns it much more into the role of a continental mayor. Is my understanding of it, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the accountability that comes with that is really useful.
The problem with our mayorship is that our mayoral region it's too small, isn't it? And it will, there's a good chance that it will map exactly onto the boundaries of the 2 new unitaries as well. And so other mayors have lots of other districts or unitaries under their responsibility. But here it's going to be, I mean, what happened originally is the original Cambridgeshire County Council included Peterborough. Peterborough moved away in the 80s and is under the mayor. But other than that, it's a really, really... So the distinction between the new unitaries, if they exist, and the mayorship is quite a small one, isn't it, geographically? I know the responsibilities are different, but you don't have as much punching power, I guess, if you've got a smaller region. But it's an important region as well.
But some of the new mayors that are coming will be similar, or the new combined authorities that are coming, they will be of a similar size, is my my understanding, I think Angela Rayner said a minimum of 500,000 people, which actually doesn't work for Cambridgeshire by splitting it in two, interestingly enough. And, I still think the perfect solution for Cambridgeshire is a single unitary for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but I also accept that ain't going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, and in lots of sorry, Dave. In lots of ways, the model that makes most sense is that to have district councils under an elected mayor, then you get both that local voice, don't you, and a regional view and an input into government. But that's not going to happen either. And so we're going to get away with the local part of it.
Yeah.
We talk about devolution. Devolution is putting power back into local people's hands in lots of ways. If you live in, in St Neots or Huntingdon and end up being in a unitary with Fenland, Wisbech is a lot further away than either Alconbury or Cambridge, and we end up having almost less local power than we did before.
Yeah, but there's a question that's about where you draw the boundaries, and you then start asking, where do people in Huntingdonshire commute to? What's the travel to work area? Where does that go? For me, St Neots, that falls naturally into being part of a Cambridge unitary. And you could argue either way for Huntingdon, and I know which way, if I was Huntingdon, I would argue. My concern is by doing the split that I think is likely. My concern is that it's slamming all the deprivation in one area, in one authority, or most of it, and I'm not sure that's helpful. Excuse me, I'm going to have to go and get a glass of water.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think there's a lot to. I actually think it might be preferable to have the district councils with the combined authority above that. I think although the government has, and it'd be interesting to see it, the logic for the 500,000. But the other thing is then would the mayor be responsible for things like all of the social care and all of the education and all of that? Because then you've got one person, doing all of that. I mean, it's. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's a difficult one for me because social care is the big issue, and obviously there's been some news on social care in the last 24 hours, I believe. But it's really important because the evidence is that that social care, when you make the social care structure smaller, they struggle to be viable. And one of the big issues that social care has is it's the thing that's making a lot of councils unviable. So the only model you can have, in my view, is one that covers, if we do split into two unitaries, a social care system that covers both, and then you either put a trust of some sort in place that does it, or you give the role to the mayoralty. I know which one I'm going for, because one gives much better accountability, and that's to give it to the mayor.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is then you've got, I mean, you end up with one person having an awful lot of responsibilities.
Yeah, but if that works in Europe, why can't it work here?
So no, it could. I know. It's just what I was going to go on to then is then well, you might, the districts might be a better way of doing it. I don't know. It's like I still think that would. This goes back to the thing. I think it would still be an improvement on what we've got because of the just the complexity of the system, and you would be much closer to. I'm going to call the council to do this, and it might be that the role of parish councils, parish and town councils, sort of fills in some of that local.
But then, if you keep the districts in place, do you then keep the planning authorities in place within the districts? And that means effectively you maintain a system that in many, many places is simply not working.
So this is an interesting one. In Huntingdonshire, if the officer's recommendation and the town or parish council recommendation disagree, it goes to the Development Management Committee.
Yeah.
Which basically means that every town and parish council in the district can force any planning application to go to committee. Mm-hmm. Would that work across all of Cambridgeshire, if you had a Cambridgeshire Development Management Committee or Planning Committee, it's just an interesting one how you would deal with that volume of.
Yeah, but for me, it is difficult, and this is part of what you need to do. So we're going to delve into planning, but the way I would look at it is you need a system where around about 10%, I would say under 10% ideally, of your decisions need to be made by your planning committee. And then, or your development management committee, whatever you want to call it. And the next step is which of those 10%, and are the planning committee seeing the most strategically important applications and the most important applications? And that is in two senses. One is in terms of the size and the impact of a development, but sometimes it can be because a decision is important because it sets an example and a message to officers about the direction that the committee expects the officers to go on future applications. And that's the bit which is difficult, but it's also about, to me, you then have to sit and work out how that works and what they are. And you have to sit and review that and say, how do we make the decisions? And if you've got a unitary, you could do something that says we keep some sort of area structure in place for planning decisions. But what we also do is have a strategic committee that sits over the top of it, that makes the decisions on strategic applications that have an implication beyond the areas in which they represent, or which are specifically cited in the development in the local plan or the strategic plan. I mean, those things are doable, and most of the unitaries have kept some area structure in place of some sort, the new unitaries.
How do those area structures work? Because are there area committees at Cambridgeshire County Council?
No, there was. So we talked about after the elections, the Lib Dems are very in favour of devolution and talked a lot about it, but they've never really appeared. I don't think the only way that you could say they actually appear is through the local highway scheme, where each area or most areas have a local highways officer who prioritises funding, but there's not much democratic input into that. That's an officer doing his or her job. And so there isn't really. I think at the city council there's some local area committees, but at county council there's none. Which is one of the problems of county council. Is I think it just feels so huge and abstract that you have very little influence over what happens in your local areas.
They are in Cambridge, but I don't think it's always a good thing. So, like in Cambridge, for example, Cambridge City, it was the Cambridge Joint Area Committee was reinstated, which was previously a few years ago scrapped, and then 1 year ago it restarted. And I mean, to me, as someone who often sits as a substitute on that, it's like, well, you are, for example, looking at an LHI recommendation anyway, then it refers back to the highways committee. So what you're doing is adding another layer. You could argue that there is obviously local input from the city councillors as well as the county councillors that represent Cambridge wards. However, in terms of decision making, like after being on a few, I'm not sure it actually does fulfill the purpose of having more local power or control, because all you're doing is you're discussing, you're putting your feedback, and you're making a recommendation to the county's highways committee, and ultimately still the highways committee will take a decision on those schemes, as it should, in my view, because the highways authority is the county and not the district. So yeah, I'm not very persuaded unless you find a way to actually have some level of democratic engagement or public engagement. Like often it's just councillors speaking amongst each other, really.
It is worth saying that within outside of Cambridge City and probably Peterborough as well, you do have something of that, because you've got the parish councils.
Yeah.
Whether enough parish councils are good enough at that is another matter, but that's something that we need to work on. And it's the same again, some of the parish councils are really good and some of them aren't, and we need to put more of a focus on the ones that aren't, and we need to be telling them they aren't good enough.
I mean that's, I don't know, there's I mean, obviously there is work to do. There's stuff to be done, but it's well, I suppose it shows the importance of getting it all right. You know, and
Absolutely.
yeah.
Anyway, in terms of our look forward to next year, is it worth talking about the mayoral election and where we think it'll go?
Yeah, and the county council election, I guess.
Yeah,
both
absolutely.
At the same time.
Yeah, it looks to me at the moment, the way the politics is panning out, that it is going to be a good election for reform, is the way I put it. And what that means for the mayoral election, I'm not sure. But certainly, I don't think reform will get enough support in the south of the county to get elected as a mayor. But I can see the county council election. I can see the county council election and the future county council, the way it is at the moment, being strongly influenced by reform. In the same way that it was in 2013.
Yeah, I think on the mayor, it all depends on, first of all, like, the reform candidate, who they will be, and also like what their ground game is as well. Because I think even having a reform candidate on the ballot with no campaigning will, of course, like have a good result given the national polling of reform. But to be able to win or go anywhere near winning, it depends on what their campaigning is, which I'm not as sure at the moment, and how you're able to appeal across Cambridgeshire and how much effort they're putting in as well.
I don't think they will win, but I think there is a danger that they will hold a balance of power of some sort.
Yeah.
It was the success of UKIP in 2013 that put the council into a coalition at that point. Not into a coalition, into a minority administration. Let's get that right. And it was actually how I became leader as well. But and it's that sort of influence, and what does it mean? If they're winning seats, they're more likely to win seats from people that are traditionally conservative voters, I would say, more likely, not entirely. And there is a thing that if they push really hard in somewhere like Cambridge around voting reform, which is one of their policies, that might attract a lot of people that will see it as worthy of making a statement.
Yeah, I agree.
So turnout at the 2021 elections was 37%. What do we think turnout will be at this election?
I'm going to be controversial here, sorry. I think the mayor's role is much more high profile now. I think people are much more aware of it, and I think that will drive up the turnout. I would like to think that's the case.
Yeah, I also think that's the case as well. But on the other hand, I'm not sure there was enough time since the general election to actually recover the lower turnout we had in the general, like in many parts of the county, for example, and whether the last few months were enough to perhaps inspire people to be more involved, because we did have very low general election turnouts in some areas, like, -7 to 10% in many constituencies in an election that was, arguably, like, people did feel there was like a chance of like change in many ways. So yeah, it is interesting. Like, I think there's still a lot of apathy. There's still a lot of like, sense in politics that, my voice doesn't matter, like everyone is the same. And I'm not sure like how much that translates at the local level. I think especially in our area, given some of the current debates, local discussions, I would hope that people want to be more involved in some of the local issues than perhaps the national politics. So we'll have to see.
And I don't know.
Yeah, there is a thing for me, and I, this is fundamentally to me why we need a system of governance in this country that relies more on coalitions, which is why I support PR, which is that the tone of campaigning is one of the things that is driving down voter turnout. I'm absolutely convinced of it, and I fear that we're heading in that direction with the mayoral election at the moment, and that will drive down turnout. And I think that's a shame, in truth. And I hope that we can join up to something that says, let's campaign based on our visions and, based on our ideas for forwards, and stop this stuff about the mayor isn't working and the mayor has failed you and all this stuff, because there's no evidence for it. And all you're doing is making the politics more divided. Every time you say something like that on a leaflet or a piece of literature, and sometimes on occasion, and I do mean on occasion, it is needed, but I don't believe that there's any warrant for it in this mayoral election. Is a reality, and the more they do it, the more divisive it becomes, and the more difficult it becomes for a mayor to actually make decisions and get decisions made through the combined authority. So that sort of stuff just isn't needed.
I mean, okay, people know I'm a member of the Labour Party, so and all the rest of it, so not unbiased. But are you referring to Paul Bristow here?
Paul's the only other candidate that's declared in Cambridgeshire, so that's where you are. But it's true. It was true, sort of. If you go back to the previous mayor, and there's a reality. He did do some things and he achieved some things, and I'm not going to throw away from that. But he struggled to get decisions through the combined authority because the county, he was a Conservative mayor, and the county broadly at one point wasn't aligned with him, and it made it very, very difficult for him. And that was also true of the current mayor at the beginning of his.
You did, but the county when James was mayor was under Conservative control, at least, wasn't it? It didn't. Basically, Nick was elected on the same day as we were elected.
The county
and that was the big ups. But I guess some of the districts had moved by then. Yeah.
But it, and it's a similar issue that I'll be honest with you, that the Greater Cambridge Partnership faced in the early days. With the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership trying to do things, and political bipartisan politics getting in the way and stopping it, and it's happened from both sides of the political divide, is the reality, and there's something in the middle of this that we have to accept, that if a mayor is elected, we have to enable him to get a job done, and divisive election campaigns prevent that. And this is the issue for Paul Bristow. If he keeps doing this, if he gets elected, and there's a strong likelihood he will, if he gets elected, what he is doing is making it very, very difficult for himself to deliver as mayor.
How so?
Because what he's doing is making the politics very, very partisan, very, very us and them, very Yaboo, and that will carry on into the combined authority, which is where the decisions are made. The decisions are not, by and large, made by the mayor. They are made by the combined authority, with the two councils having a veto on strategic transport issues. Sorry, the two top-tier councils, so Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And we saw that on one occasion in under Nick's time on demand management, congestion charging, whatever you want to call it, with Peterborough effectively using their veto to veto congestion charging for Cambridge. With the Conservatives, and what you're doing is you're asking for more of that, it becomes people making decisions for politics' sake, rather than for the interests of the people, and that's not what the mayoralty is about.
Okay, a couple of things. There, one is, you've got other places where you have, you've got combined authority setups. Am I right in thinking that they have? There is generally, so I'm thinking up in Manchester, say, you don't have the political diversity that you do here, because here you've got, Labour, Lib Dem, and Conservatives all running different councils, and sort of geographically diverse area, blah 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 blah, all the rest of it.
Well, I mean, my understanding of there is some conservatism up in that neck of the woods, But the West Midlands mayoralty is a really good example where, you know, there is a diverse mix of councils led in different ways. And one of the things that Andy Street was fantastic at was, from day one, Andy Street was able to get real momentum behind the West Midlands and get those councils, irrespective of their political colour, rowing in behind him. And we need to enable that in Cambridgeshire. And my fear is the tone of campaigning will stop it.
The other thing to ask, and maybe this is, do we really have a mayoralty if all the decisions are made by the combined authority?
That's a good question. I personally, I like accountability, and I think with giving the decisions to the mayor, I think giving them the decisions to the mayor does improve accountability. Because if I was mayor, if you were getting to the end of your tenure and you struggled to deliver, I'd just point to the combined authority and all the others, and cloud the accountability, whether it was justified or not. And that is a good question, and I think some of that might be changing as well. Certainly, they are talking about getting rid of the vetoes.
So the thing is, it's like in London, where you have the Mayor of London. I think I'm right in saying that the Greater London Assembly needs a 2/3 vote to stop the budget. Is that right? So there is a check there, and obviously there's the scrutiny that goes on, and you can highlight things and the rest of it. But the mayor has much more autonomy to get on and do things.
That's true, but it's also true that within the combined authority, there are some decisions that I think need 2/3 majority to allow them to happen.
Yeah, no, but this is the other way around. The combined in London, you need 2/3 to override the mayor.
No, absolutely, it is completely the other way around. That's the point, I think. Yeah.
Speaking about, one of the decisions that the mayor does have power on that's coming up in 2025 is, bus franchising. So a decision is expected to be made in February, the latest articles say, coming out yesterday. Although the combined authority said, that's from the BBC, this was subject to change, but they're working on taking a decision in February based on the consultation on bus franchising. So do you think it will happen in February? Do you think it will be postponed?
I'm in two minds on this. So one is, yes, I do want it to happen. I would like bus franchising yesterday. Thank you very much. I don't want to. I wonder if, with the election coming up, and I haven't made my mind up, whether there's an argument to say actually this is something that should be as part of the campaign.
I don't. There's been extensive consultation on it. People have had a real strong opportunity to have their say on it, and I just think a decision needs to be made. And if the mayor comes in, effectively, he could ditch it anyway. But I just don't want to see things slowed down because of it. I think it would be a really good thing to get the mayoral candidates to sign up or otherwise to franchising. I think it'd be a really nice thing to do, to see where they stand on it. Because to me, based on my experience as a councillor, and I have to say, I do think, based on the evidence of the guests we got in here before, that things have changed with Stagecoach and whoever, but that change could be temporary, and the improvements that we're seeing in the way they are operating could be temporary. Because I think they're very much personality based. I want to see franchising. I think franchising is, to me, bus franchising is great conservatism. There's a reality there. It keeps a sense of control and management within the council, but what it does is allow the public sector to franchise into the route. And to me, it as a conservative, albeit a very centre ground conservative, it makes absolute sense. It's certainly a better model than what we've got now, and I'd like to see how the candidates stand on it. And the only way I think you can do that is by saying, let's go ahead, let's do it, and let's put it through the mill during the election and see what other candidates say. Because I think franchising will also be very popular.
That's actually really, no, I think I agree with you. I think you're right.
I agree in terms of campaign as well, because there's nothing. I've been to so many, different general election hustings, and there's always, always you have like said controversial issue, and it's so easy, for like candidates across the party to say, oh, let's have another inquiry on this. Let's have yet another consultation. Let's like listen some more. And I know if a decision is actually made in February, like the question then becomes, okay, this has been made. Will you continue this? Will you continue it in a different shape, or will you ditch the plan? Like there's no more like, oh, let's consult even further. Let's wait another like, X amount of years before we take a decision, because I'm afraid to say what my view is on this. So I think it does put all the candidates in a position to actually say, do I agree with this or not?
I mean, that does to a certain extent depend on what comes out of the consultation as well.
Yeah.
But my gut instinct is the consultation will be broadly and quite strongly positive about franchising. And if that's the case, we just need to get on with it. It is my view, but we'll see.
Yeah,
there's some other decisions as well, like linked to speaking about the combined authority, so the budget setting process in January, and obviously the budget setting process for the councils as well. So the decision on whether to keep the £2 bus fare cap. So at the moment it's been extended till March, I believe, but in the budget setting process, they are discussing whether there's a possibility to extend it further or not. So there are other linked decisions to buses beyond franchising, which are in the budget setting process of the combined authority, which would be interesting to have a look at when that comes.
And some of this, the mayoral precept and all that stuff is a big part of this, and there's a reality. We've seen some significant improvements in bus services as a direct result of the mayoral precept, and as a good example, that the last train from Peterborough to Whittlesey now is 11 minutes, and I caught that bus on after you two made me drink too much last week, and I caught that bus back from Peterborough to Whittlesey, and it was reasonably busy. It wasn't rammed, but there were a reasonable amount of people on it to say that actually it's a decent service, and as people get to know about it more, it'll probably become busier. And we need to think about what some of the questions within the campaign. If somebody is saying I'm not going to increase the mayoral precept, then effectively he is saying that the value of the mayoral precept is going to decrease during the 4 years that they're mayor because of inflation. And how are they going to keep the momentum that is going on in terms of growth of bus services? How are you going to do that when the value of your precept is going down?
Well, this is the other thing with franchising. You can have a franchising system, but it's dependent on the amount of subsidy that you put in, and there is the core problem here is it's really difficult, or it's probably impossible, to run a commercial bus network system, whatever, in rural areas. It's socially important, and it might, it's worth doing. I would say it's worth doing, but it's difficult to do on a profit making basis.
But it's also economically important, and this is something this is something that Conservatives, especially, need to be thinking about. As an employer, if you're an employer looking to employ people, you want to pick candidates from the widest pool of people available. And if you're talking about employing young people, that means that you need more people to be able to access work and get to places of work by public transport. There's no two ways about it. That's good for the economy because employers are able to employ better people as a result of it. And those things need to be thought about, and the benefits. But also, sorry, I'm going to rant about this. We've seen what is interesting to me is we've seen a number of Conservatives call, because of the cost per person of certain routes, for those routes to be abandoned. But at the same time, we're seeing Conservatives calling for bus routes in certain areas that aren't covered, that are likely to require the same sorts of levels of subsidy. And that conflict is really difficult, and Conservatives need to be better at messaging than that. If they really want to run a good combined authority, then they need to get the messaging right around this. But also, I would say those routes that are subsidised quite heavily, there's a reality, which is that those routes need time to try and bed down and for awareness to be raised before we start making knee-jerk reactions to cut them.
Can I just I agree with you entirely, and this is one of the things that I think would be we want to at the moment we don't really have a bus system. We're starting to get the beginnings of one happening for various reasons, and this goes back to you've got the people at Stagecoach and Jews and so on, but also what the mayor has done so far. And also the fact that they had, and I do go back to this, there's a thing that people have been talking about franchising. And I do think that has led to the bus companies changing how they do things a bit. But to just on the employment point of view, is a very specific one for me. I used to work on the Ermine Street Business Park, and it used to be I could get the B from near my house, just up the road, and it would stop outside the Ermine Street Business Park. That was great. The B then was changed, so it goes to the hospital, and you've got the 904. Now the situation has improved. There are more buses now, but so Ermine Street Business Park has got big employers on it. It's quite big, but it's got things like Anglian Water. So it's quite. There's a lot there. If you're coming from Peterborough, the first bus that stops there is, and bear in mind that bus goes through like Stilton and Sawtry, so it's not just from Peterborough. The first bus that stops there is at 8:30, and then there isn't another bus until 9:53 on the 904 route. Going the other way, and this includes from the train station, the buses stop at 7:37 or 9:07. Now, I'm sure this is me asking for the world on a stick or the moon on a stick, but there is an issue there that you've got a place there with lots of employment. Sorry, going back to your point, Martin. There will be people who could go and work for Anglian Water who'd be really good, but going to struggle to get there.
Absolutely,
because the buses don't line up, and that will be similarly if you're on. There's no bus that goes through St Peter's Industrial Estate in Huntingdon. Obviously, I'm focused on Huntingdon. That will be, and we've got a relatively good bus service around here compared to other places. It'll be.
Yeah, I go back to something that I've mentioned before, which is I think it was called the MAT, the training facility on Alconbury Weald, which was I was shown around that through some stuff I was doing with the Chamber of Commerce, and it was really good, and you could see the absolute value in what they were doing there. And the reason that failed wasn't because it wasn't a good facility; it was because people couldn't get there.
And actually, I'm thinking there's a bus recently that was changed and so that it stops at the Amazon warehouse.
Yeah. The Whittlesey service was redirected so that it goes on its way to Peterborough. It takes a tiny detour that adds about 3 or 4 minutes to the journey and goes past Amazon. And Amazon is a major employer in Peterborough, and it's a really sensible thing to do. It's getting a lot of flack from people because not many people are using it at the moment. But again, it needs time to bed down. It was a sensible decision. In my view, it just need to say bed down, have people raise awareness of it, and people start using it more.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the thing about modal shift taking time. So I'm going to go back to the very local thing again. the 303, 305 service now between them provide an hourly service on Conygear Road through the Oxmoor estate. It would, that is a big improvement. I don't think as many people are aware yet that that's there. That goes out to March and Chatteris and so on. But it's also a good service going into town, and actually for a lot of people that makes it much easier to get into Huntingdon town centre than previously, where you either had to walk into town or walk to get to the B route, or another route to get in. So it's that improvement. So I'm going off onto my obsession with Huntingdon buses.
Well, speaking about buses, I do need to take a bus soon. I was going to just comment on this, this issue around like especially transport from smaller villages. I think what's really frustrating, I've seen some like posts recently from like certain certain candidates. It's very easy for me to look, at Cambridgeshire and identify especially some of the smallest villages and say, well, there's no bus there, even though some of them are indeed included in the Tiger on Demand zone, such as West Huntingdonshire. But for example, Paul Bristow saying, well, there's none of those villages have buses, like, Keystone, Molesworth. Well, Keystone, for example, like I've been there, lovely pub there, by the way. It's about like 120 houses. So again, the question is that, for you to be able to provide something that's not on-demand transport, connecting some of the very smallest villages and settlements within Cambridgeshire, you have to think about significant subsidies. So always it brings me back to the question, okay, do you support franchising? Do you support some form of local revenue, increasing mayoral preset, or at least maintaining it in line with inflation, or some other way to raise some local revenue? Because otherwise it just wouldn't work. Someone else was saying, I've seen some other posts about, Holywell, like just outside St. Ives, again, about 100 houses in Holywell. It would be great to have a bus connecting Holywell to Kniddingworth to St. Ives. But again, it needs significant subsidy to be able to serve like smaller communities. So I don't think anyone is against that. I do agree with Martin's point about, the wider social and economic benefit of having public transport. The question always is down to like who is paying for this, because it won't be done on a commercial basis.
There's also the quandary with this that if you're going to do this, you do need more public subsidy, and you may be able to use franchising to make some of that work better. But there's a reality that on the one hand you're calling for more public subsidy, and the other you're making a commitment to effectively diminish the value of the mayor's precepts over the 4 years that you're mayor, and those two things don't match. And that's a reality. And if he thinks they do match, he needs to demonstrate it.
So this is a video that Paul Bristow put up. I mean, the thing is, we've
got to watch this because we're only sort of having a slam at one side. And
I was going to say we do need to. We don't want to. And the thing is, I think it would be really good to have the discussion about how you cover, provide public transport in rural areas.
And we need to be.
And is Tiger on Demand, doing what it needs to do?
But absolutely, it's new, and there's a reality around that, which is that you need time to bed it down, and somewhere within that, after a while of operating, and I would say it's more than a few months, you need to sit and look at it and go, okay, how do we improve it? What do we need to change? I mean, that's valid, and we should be doing that all the time anyway.
Well, I think everyone should try. So like, I'm just like going, because I do get the point. It doesn't work all the time in the sense, Stephen and I were trying the previous thing, and now it's the same with Tiger on Demand. Like, I think the issue is like for a lot of the journeys, you do have to plan in advance, because if you just go like, you'd go on a Uber app, like it doesn't like immediately, and not even then, sometimes at certain times you can't find a taxi immediately. If I go now, for example, from Hinchinbrook Hospital, where I'm going to take the bus soon, to, let's say, Molesworth, as an example from the post, it is available. Look, Tiger on Demand.
That's
so
a huge improvement.
Does exist.
That's a huge improvement.
But I just want to go back to this, and the other thing that I'm interested in this is something that I talked about earlier. It's this, and it was Alex that highlighted this to me earlier on in the week through a Facebook post. This Debate Not Hate campaign that the LGA are running, and it talks about the fact that debating and disagreeing with another is a healthy part of democracy, but abuse and intimidation crosses the line into dangerous territory, and the right engagement matters. And we need to embed that not just in the way that councillors talk amongst each other, and candidates and politicians, but we need to start thinking about candidates as well, and trying to get candidates to sign up to effectively the principles within Debate Not Hate as a candidate. From my view, because it's really important, because one of the things you do when you start saying some of the things that are being said publicly, and that includes a few things that are being said about Paul as well, by the way, that what you do is you encourage the sort of behavior that you see on Twitter and on other places, and the sort of language you see used to other politicians. You encourage that amongst others because they see it as valid and a valid way of communicating with politicians. And the only way you can end it is by saying that it's unacceptable, and by candidates and politicians taking the lead. And I hope within Cambridgeshire we can get some sign up for that, because candidates of all sides are capable of this. And we need to make it better, make it, the mayoral election an election that's about the candidates' visions for Cambridgeshire and articulating how they're going to deliver those visions.
Right.
And I really hope we can sort of have a think about that. I think, I'm going to be doing some radio stuff in Whittlesey next year, and Debate Not Hate is going to be one of the things I'm going to be talking about.
So I think there's two things. I agree. I think there's two things there, though. There's one is the sort of like you've got the intimidation of councillors and the abuse of councillors that sometimes you get. And look, I get everything. The country's in a mess. Councillors are, elected representatives, and sometimes people just need to unload or vent. But sometimes what you get is too much. But there's also a thing about the like standards in politics, because there's I think there's almost this maybe we should talk about some other time, a sort of commitment to like how, as well as the sort of minimum of Debate Not Hate, also aspiring to something more.
Yeah, no, I agree, but Debate Not Hate is a good starting point from my perspective, and the notion. There's also, by the way, and this is one of the reasons that I talk about this fact that coalitions are a way forward in politics. Coalitions can and do work, and I think Huntingdonshire is proving that, and I think Cambridgeshire is proving that. They've not done everything, and no council can, but actually they've been reasonably successful. And there are a lot of people talking about the fact that the Cambridgeshire coalition would collapse within a year. And it's basically survived a full term, and that shows that they do work. And there's a reality, which is if you're campaigning and when you're campaigning that at the end of it you're going to have to try and work in coalition with somebody, it will tone down the language you use when you're campaigning, because you've then got to sit around with a table with somebody and negotiate a coalition agreement of some sort, but also then go on from there to serve the people that are elected you.
Yeah.
There's no Tiger on demand to Covington, though. I checked all the villages, so I can get a pickup in 20 minutes from Hinchinbrook to Molesworth, but not to Covington. Yeah,
cool.
I'll try more this weekend, but I think just on this Tiger on demand, I think anyone who uses it, please do send the feedback, because every time I use I think in the past and so on, like actually the more people using it and providing feedback about what works or what like times like need to be available and so on, the better the service will become. Obviously it can't be perfect because it's on demand service, and in some areas there's not a lot of demand until people get used to it existing and actually start using it more. But you are speaking about some villages where maybe out of like 150 to 100 people, maybe like 5 people would currently like know about this and like look at it. But like if more people know about this and try to use it, then you
Oh,
like
honestly-
have it adapt to the situation locally.
So this is something that came up. Sorry, on Ting, that came up in the sort of discussion on that video. Something that Ross Martin mentioned, that where he is out in Sawtry and west of the A1, the service is, isn't that great. And the thing is, mostly when I've taken Ting, I've actually been going south from Huntingdon, and different areas of the Ting area may have sort of different experiences of the service. And like I said, it may need changing. I do wonder, you've got within the area, you've got two centres of mass, if you like, in Huntingdon and St Neots, which means the Ting buses are going to be near those more often, because people are going to want to go to or from there, which means it's going to be easier to get them to or from Huntingdon or if you're in Huntingdon or St Neots, there'll probably be one, because there'll be one going in. But if you want to do a different journey, and particularly if you're further out, in the top end of the area, the buses might not be there as often, and that might actually, there may well be an actual a real issue there.
Part of the problem with Ting is making sure that all demand doesn't get sucked up by St Neots residents and Huntingdon residents, who are, compared with the rest of the district, relatively well provided with buses. But it's difficult because the rural areas where people want to get, they're probably not getting buses to other rural villages. They want to go into big population centres, and so that's part of the challenge, I guess.
That's part of working this system out. And my instinct is that we're heading towards a system with more demand responsive Tiger type systems, and I think some of that will work its way through as that happens. I can't wait for a demand responsive system in Whittlesea. We've got portions of Whittlesea itself that are poorly served by buses, and I think a demand responsive service of some sort, a Tiger on demand for Whittlesea would actually resolve it. And you'd start seeing buses hiking around, the Birds Estate in Whittlesea is a good example, or down Drybread Road to reach certain areas as well. And I think that would be great. And I can see that being the future, because the technology is only going to get better. And I think from that perspective, some of the issues you talk about, Stephen, might sort themselves out.
Yeah, I think it's part of the response is like the use of the technology as well. Like, and I think the current app is much better than the previous thing. So there's an improvement there, but it's about how you're able to actually predict the demand as well. Because yes, if I was going from, in between two of the villages, if I was going, let's say, from Covington to Molesworth, right? Like, the system should be able to say, okay, they're like, are there like 2 people or 20 people in this particular area who might expect a service on this day of the week, because otherwise you can't have the vehicles just waiting around in random places. And of course, it would be easier for you to get one from Huntingdon to somewhere than if you are in Alconbury Wells to somewhere, because there's fewer around. So, the further out you are, the more you have to plan in advance your journey, which I get is not ideal, because sometimes, yes, we have to go to appointments where we know, okay, on this bus in 3 days time I need to take a Tiger on demand to Hinchinbrook Hospital because I have an appointment. But sometimes you might just wake up and think, I actually want to go on Saturday to Huntingdon to to do some shopping, and you don't want to plan 3 days in advance. So then there should be like a way to be able to predict more accurately what demand there is in a certain area and be prepared for that.
I mean, there's a reality, which is no system is going to be perfect. Nobody's going to get the sort of bus service that they would ideally want, because that would be a bus going past the door every minute. And we also have to accept that rural areas are always going to have a lesser service compared to more urban areas. I think those things are an inevitability, but I think if you live in those areas, you learn to plan around it a little bit as well. And I just think that, but at least what we've got is something that people can plan around. And that to me is important. It's worth mentioning quickly that actually, we've talked about buses a lot from them, and we always do on this thing, and that's why it's titled as it is. But actually, some of the other mayoral stuff is really important as well. Thinking about some of the strategic transport stuff. like the A428 and the A141 realignment and stuff like that. You know, it's important to try and get some sort of vision out of both county council candidates for those sorts of strategies. And, you know, in Whittlesea, we've got, you know, the Whittlesea bypass that, you know, is being looked at and, you know, routes being examined and stuff like that. And you know, the role of the mayors and of candidates around those things, because there's a reality which is it's easy for all of them to say, I support it. It's really, really easy on these things if they're popular. But there's also an issue. That there's another question, which is how are you going to get one step beyond supporting it in terms of making it happen?
Yeah, I mean on the strategic road stuff is interesting because it's needed to unlock a lot of planning. You know where we want the development, and that's important. But also it has to be done right, and it has to be, you know, we don't want we want not using the car to be a meaningful option.
No, absolutely right.
But at the same time, we need those. There are places on the road network which just need improving, need bypassing, whatever. You know, the A14 thing has improved things for Huntingdon.
Absolutely. Huntingdon visibly is a much better place without that horrible road going over the top of the railway station.
Absolutely. Well, it's also okay. This is entirely anecdotal, but it's quieter because you haven't got the noise at height spreading out over the town. It's been a big improvement. You know, this will be true sort of across the place. But you know, we want those roads to unlock the housing.
All of these, yeah, but it's not just about unlocking housing. And this is me saying this. It's not just about unlocking housing. They should be solutions to existing problems as well.
Yeah.
And you know, they should, even after development has taken place, those roads should still, and the ambition should still be for those roads to flow better than the current ones do now. And that has to be part of it as well. But there's, how do you enable it? You know, how do you go the extra mile? What are you going to do as a candidate that's different to make sure these things are delivered?
Yeah. I'm sure we were going to talk more about what's going to be coming on this year, because I think we were going to talk about the county elections. All right, let's just as we wrap up, just very quickly, what do you think the overall result will be for the county council elections? Just in big handfuls.
I think the county council elections, I think that it is going to be the most difficult result for the county council probably in a generation, because of the likely impact of the reform vote. And I think it will be a hung council, but I think pulling together a coalition is going to be a lot more complex than it is now. We may end up with a minority administration of some sort.
Yeah, I mean the other, apart from the emergence of reform, the other story of the last 2 years has been the strengthening of the Lib Dem position. So, you know, Lib Dems are now the biggest party, currently the biggest party in the county council. It used to be the Conservatives, but that's the Conservative lead's been eroded. And so, you know, and also with the general election victories, they've got 2 extra MPs, two extra MPs around here as well. So I think their position has increased as well. I think reform is going to cause, judging by the election returns that I saw, I think that even the south of the county or the west of the county, as Martin described it, I think reform's going to make an impact too. There was areas of St Neots which I wouldn't have expected to be kind of reformed to poll strongly, where they polled really strongly, and so I think that that's going to be an issue for the Conservatives and for everybody else as well. So, yeah, it's going to be a completely new county council, is all I can imagine.
Yeah, I also think I think it will be a no overall control, and even like one of those like arrangements of like, okay, there's an agreement on certain things, like big things like the budget, and maybe a no overall control if it's very difficult to form a coalition. Because I do agree there will be like some reform seats for sure. There will be some Lib Dem seats which are very obvious will be lost to probably the Conservatives in parts of South Cambridgeshire where there weren't other candidates of other parties in 2021. And there will also be, even Cambridge City will be very interesting. I think there will be like at least one, if not two, Green councillors as well on the county council, like from Cambridge City, perhaps a seat outside Cambridge City as well. I know the Greens are doing much more targeted work than they have done back in 2021. So there will be, and also like one of the other interesting things is the number of new candidates as well, not only some of the Conservatives who've been on the county for a long time being deselected and having new Conservative candidates in those seats, but also from other parties, like several Liberal Democrats, long-standing Lib Dems retiring this year as well, having new Liberal Democrat candidates, lots of more like younger candidates, people who haven't been on county before as well, which could be very interesting from the point of view of campaigning, because often with new candidates, people are more, like putting more like doorstep work, like they have perhaps more time being their first election to actually do a lot of activity locally compared to someone who stood perhaps like 7 or 8 times, who already has a personal vote and a record in the area. So I think from a campaign perspective, it will be very interesting, especially in areas where every single candidate is a new candidate and not someone who's represented the area before.
Can you see a situation where some Conservatives jump ship to reform at the last minute before the election?
There are. I know the local Conservatives are watching some people. There are some. There's also some. The thing about big parties, of course, is their selection goes on, isn't there?
Yeah.
And there's going to be some existing Conservative councillors who haven't been selected because that's already happened for the Conservatives. So they're going to be ripe for moving. Lots of those guys, because they're going to be disgruntled. Some of them will stand as independents, I'm sure. But yeah, there's a possibility still, I guess, that some might jump ships, which would cause a pain in the ass for the local parties, because they have to do their reselection again, don't they?
No, absolutely. I mean, there are already candidates that have been deselected, absolutely, and whether they'll jump ships, because some of them are dual-hatted, so there's an implication there. But yeah, I believe that in some areas we're going to see it, because it's a lot of people care more about being a councillor than they do to party affiliation. And that sort of instinct will kick in, and you'll either see people standing as independents to try and overcome some of the issues, or you'll see them jump ship one way or another. And the natural place for that, maybe in Cambridge City, you'll see people jump to the Greens from the Labour Party. I don't know, but certainly I could see some people jumping ship in Fenland.
It's a difficult one, because I think leaving a party can be it's a pretty big deal, I think.
Tell me about it. It's a real thing. I absolutely wrestled with it for years, and for about 2 or 3 years. I think from the moment Boris Johnson was elected as and selected by the Conservative Party as Prime Minister, and I realised the party was losing the plot. And there's this thing about the Conservative Party I want it to be, and the Conservative Party it used to be, and the Conservative Party it had become. And it was only when the Rwanda policy was announced was it 3 years ago, that I eventually got to a point where I just thought, I've got to go. I can't do this. And you do wrestle with your conscience. And I still instinctively, want to be a Conservative Party member. But the Conservative Party does not represent any form of conservatism that I support. It has no compassion. It has no sense of a lot of it has no sense of awareness of the real world. And I think I said this before in this podcast. I've been reading Rory Stewart's book about his time in Parliament, and you read the stuff that he dealt with as prisons minister. Where he tried to make a difference, and did make some difference. But you talk about, what prisons are actually like, and how conservatives don't seem to care about that stuff, and they also don't care about the implications of not caring about that stuff.
So there's also a thing I've been thinking about, that while and don't read anything into this, I'm quite broadly, I think we're doing the right things in government, like yada yada yada. But I don't think the political system generally is working well, and I think the way all political parties are functioning is part of that. You've got into this thing where everybody is always trying to win the biggest slice of cake, even if the result of that is that the cake gets smaller.
And absolutely, and that's the thing about politicians, that they are increasingly more minded to think about career and to think about the implications for them as an individual than they are to think about the impact of their decisions on the people that they purport to serve. And I think that's true of politicians across the board in this country. It's obviously not all of them, but it is a hell of a lot of them. There's this big thing about the way politics works, that you become a politician because you've got a conscience and you care about people and you care about your community. And the first thing that happens when you get elected, unless you're somebody like Stephen who's an independent, is that you then have all of that all of that caring and everything basically whipped out you by the whipping system, and it's a real quandary for politics.
There is also part of the logic is that, and this is true of all parties. They're quite often actually what a local area wants, what's good for the area, is a good local councillor, and you end up supporting people because they're a useful vote. Don't get me wrong, the big decisions matter, or good constituency MP, or whatever that means, and all the rest of it. There's just a problem with the whole logic of, I think partly it's the party system. I think our parties are too big, and also a lot of them are built for a time, and when you had mass membership parties that don't exist like they used to.
No, I agree with all of that, and I would say to anybody that's thinking about where to vote for a mayor, where to vote for a local councillor, I would say, and I bet Stephen would agree with this, I would say the most important thing is the quality of the candidate and what the candidate stands for in terms of what you want. The party affiliation is, to me, and I know Alex and David, you might disagree, the party affiliation is the lesser issue. And with the mayor especially, you need to look at the mayors, set aside the party politics, and look at what is it that they offer me in terms of how does their vision for Cambridgeshire, for my locality, match my view about what that locality should be, and vote based on that, not based on what party affiliations are. Alex and David, I know you'd say that the Labour candidate's always the right one.
But that's one of the bizarre things. So I really appreciate your honesty in all things, Martin, and you don't get involved. But I can't understand, let's not name any candidates, but when you've got really poor candidates, and you've got otherwise, exceptional local people backing them because they're a member of their party, I find that whole thing frankly bizarre, and it makes me not want to be involved anymore, is the honesty of it, because I've seen it throughout the general election. Is this party loyalty thing is above all reason, and it's really bad for democracy. It really is. I agree with you.
I agree, and there are some dreadful candidates out there. I remember when I took over chairing the planning committee at Fenland, the standard of some of the councillors on the planning committee was dreadful. We had one guy on there who could barely read, and that's not to say that somebody who can't read shouldn't be a councillor, because they can stand for things and they can do stuff. But when you're talking about a planning committee where you're getting committee reports that in some cases are hundreds of pages long, how can you realistically do that job when you can't read? And so, it does. I do baffle. It does baffle me sometimes, and also, being blunt about it, the approach some people have towards other people of different affiliations, and that's true of people of every political party, by the way. That is something that baffles me. People are entitled to have a different view with you, and you should respect that view and argue the case about why yours is better, rather than slagging them off because their view is different. And a lot of this and the way it happens now actually comes about because of the way Boris Johnson delivered the Brexit deal and came to power to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy one. It's really not. The thing is, political parties are so a couple of things. One is that political parties are a good heuristic, or should be a good heuristic. Like broadly, what does this, what does somebody stand for? The thing is, Stephen, I happen to know you anyway. I've got a pretty good idea of where your politics are, all the rest of it. But if somebody stands just as an independent, you're not. That's not giving you on its own a huge amount of information.
Neither does party affiliation.
Well,
it really doesn't, because they're such broad churches.
Agreed.
Yeah, and you've got some right headbangers standing as Labour candidates and some standing as Conservative candites, and probably some as Liberal Dems. But Lib Dems don't seem to attract those kind of people so much. But you do get some real idiots, yeah. And the truth is, because they're hiding behind a party banner, then people don't consider their actual views. And so actually democracy would work much better if we all listened to candidates. I know it's a bloody ideal that's never going to happen. And this is part of the problem with it.
One of the things I would say is, if you want to know the quality of your candidate, write to them and demand a response. If they don't respond, that's one thing. The second thing is, look at the tone of the response, look at the quality of the response that you get, and then make a decision for yourself on who the best candidate is. And also, if you're not sure, ask them, when you get that reply, ask them whether they drafted that reply themselves or whether it was done by an agent. And that includes election leaflets as well. Did you write your own leaflet, or did an agent write it for you? Because within the Conservative Party, there is a lot of work done by agents writing leaflets and literature for candidates, because they are not capable of writing their own.
Well, I'm not actually sure I have a problem with that. I mean, I think if, as long as the candidate has sign off on it, for instance, I mean, the thing is, for instance, same thing when I write stuff for work, I tend to get someone to edit it. I've started using ChatGPT a lot because my writing style isn't always as good as it should be.
That's different. Having somebody to do an editor's role on it to make sure that it's grammatically correct and everything else is different to somebody writing something that dictates what your priorities are as an individual.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood you.
Yeah, I think it's about the issues. Like I do agree, like the candidate should have the say on what goes on the leaflet, and not just have oh, you have to put this bar chart here, or you have to put this local story, or pretend you're the local champion, or X or Y issue that you haven't done any work on, but you maybe attended one meeting and then pretend that you saved this whole facility kind of thing. But I think it's an issue of how national parties often push kind of national campaign literature and messages on the local level. And I think we need to make the separation between, what is local election and local issues as opposed to the national politics of it. And there's nothing wrong having a national leaflet around, or delivering, or keeping people updated about, what the government is doing or what the opposition are doing in parliament. But for local elections, I would like it to be about issues that actually county councillors do have power on, rather than pretending to do things that none of us will be able to deliver, even if we tried our best, which often happens in campaigning as well. So I think that, but on that point around the candidates and some people being bad candidates in different parties, I think that's up to people within the political parties as well to campaign within their parties for better selection processes and better training of candidates as well. And it's something I'm really, really passionate about, actually not selecting people just because, they've been there for a long time or they're friends with so and so and so on. Like, I think it happens like in so many areas, and it's wrong. I think like all the selections should be open, should be based on like, the merits of the candidates, and shouldn't be, like I have to do this favor to someone and like give them a seat. Like, I think that's like wrong in any party. And yes, it will drive up the quality of candidates if they're all more competitive, I think.
I absolutely agree. And there are, some of the political parties, I think pretty much all of them actually, their view is that they must have a candidate in every seat possible. And there's a reality that if in doing that, some of the candidates you're putting up are absolute dross that have a chance of winning, don't put anybody up, because your electorate deserve better.
So
but that won't happen. That won't happen. And it should.
There's also a thing that you get elected as a councillor, and then you find out what's involved in being a councillor. I think this is the thing about the national campaigning. People say, and sometimes it's an honest mistake. It's like, I'll try and fix this, and actually it's not something you can do, or you can't do it directly, and you've got to, you've got to with other things. But it's like a lot of being a councillor. I mean, not so much at the town or parish level, but on the principal authorities, is being able to navigate the committee system, having good working relationships with officers, being able to find out information, quickly. It's those skills, and it's actually suddenly,
and also the expectations around how you work with officers as well. It's not just having good relationships with the officers, but the expectations, because one of the things that I remember from my time in Cambridgeshire was dealing with elected members who were, being blunt about it, damned awful to some officers, and that was true of all of the political parties. I would say there were definitely a few Conservatives, because one of which we ejected from the group because of it, and it was certainly true of some of the Lib Dems and some of the UKIP councillors. That's for definite.
Yeah, and I know it's if you think of, I don't know, the thing is, I know we're being very down on it, and saying there's councillors who aren't great and everything's terrible, but you've also got a lot of people who are actually really talented, who spend and who give up a lot of time to do it, and are trying to sort of do the right thing for their community. And it's and local, just we've complained often enough, God knows, about local government structures on this show, but actually there is a lot of good that gets done as well.
I know 100%, and the majority of candidates are really good candidates, and they're really good councillors, and I'd say that especially at county council level. I think within the districts, I think it's patchy around Cambridgeshire, and it's patchy across the country. But the majority are great, and the majority, care about what they do, and they're really good at what they do. But there's a reality that we should want that quality to be universal, and we should demand that quality is universal. Whether we'll ever achieve it or not is another matter, but we can certainly be better than we are now.
So, and this goes back to why political parties are important. They may not be doing their job very well at the moment, but political parties are an institution that have a role in the political system, and they should be doing the work to make sure you have good candidates. It's just that there is an issue about the incentive structures that political parties operate under as well. Yeah. And partly this is the electoral system we have.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The issue with political parties, and it's something that Stephen said earlier on, is that the political parties are too broad. So even if somebody is a member of a political party, you really don't know what they stand for. Because just to give two examples, and this is not criticism of Steve Tierney and his ilk on the right of the Conservative Party. Politically, I am absolutely miles apart from Steve Tierney, and probably always have been to a certain extent, and that's valid and legitimate. That I have a different view to Steve, but do we belong in the same party? I'm pretty sure we don't, and that's true. That's true of the Labour Party as well.
With the momentum infiltration that happened during your watch, David, that made a huge difference to the people who were put forward as candidates. Yeah, to the tone of the campaigns. Yeah. It completely changed everybody, and those people were standing under the same banner. Not so much.
This thing.
Go on, you first, David.
So this is one of the things. I did nearly leave the Labour Party during while Jeremy Corbyn was leader. Not my politics in a lot of ways, and some I decided that I wanted to sort of stay, and the stuff around anti-Semitism was pretty awful, and I felt I sort of had to stay and try and fight that, and I'm still not sure that was the right thing to do, but like I said, and just to make sure I really make myself unpopular, I actually think a lot of what the current government is doing is actually the right approach. I actually, I do support a lot of it, even if that, there's been some pretty bad.
On that note, I'm just not trying to avoid the topic, but I really need to catch my bus. So I can debate this the next time.
There's two things with this, and goodbye, Alex. And there's two things with this that are really important. The first one, I think, is that PR, in my view, would see a wider range of political parties and a bigger range. And I think the Conservative Party, I think the Conservatives at the moment are one nationism is lost in the Conservative Party. There's no two ways about that. It's been lost since the day Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, despite some of the things he said to some of the one nationists in the party. So having a political system that allowed one nationism and the compassion within it to sort of emerge and be at the forefront, would be a great thing. And I feel the same about the Labour Party, that if the Labour Party split in two and was effectively, a centre-left social democratic party. Cool. I'm not sure that's the right word, but a socialist party, I think the electorate would understand it a lot better, and I think that.
Yeah. And the thing is, there's it's like you could have a sensible discussion within like say on the right of the Labour Party between sort of blue Labour types, Blairites, old Labour right about where should we be going. It's difficult to have that within the party when you've also got people just where that the discussion is some people are like, oh, how do we deal with I don't know, the economy at the moment. It's like some people it's like, oh, we should invest in whatever, and some people it's like we should be nationalizing the FTSE 100. And okay, that's a bit extreme, but there are some people who would go for that, sorry, I'm wibbling, but I think hopefully people get a sense of what I'm saying, and that's difficult. The question for me is, given that political parties have an important role as a political institution, political parties are important in making the system work. And they're not doing that at the moment. What do you do? Do you stay within a political party with which you broadly agree to make it, to try and improve that party's system, or do you say actually I'm going to leave? And that feels like morally perhaps purer, but might actually make it harder to make the improvements that you think the system needs.
Well, actually, I think this is because that's the dilemma I faced, and I've got people that I know, that are of a similar politics to me, that have stayed within the Conservative Party because they get a say in who the next leader is, as an example. But there is I still, as an example, I regularly comment on Conservative Home, and I comment under my own name deliberately because I think that's honest. And I comment about one nationism and the contrast between good one nationism. There are conservatives out there who believe that the conservative is too left wing at the moment. And there are, and I don't mean a few. There's a lot of them, and they want rid of the one nationists out of the party, and they want to move even further, and they want to move towards Liz Truss's thing. But I made a point. You talked earlier on about the direction the Labour Party is going in. I made it because there was a comment about this week about Kemi Badenoch and the lack of policy for Conservative Party, and I said that the Conservative Party doesn't need policy at the moment. The point for me is the Conservative Party need a strategic framework to outline a strategic framework on which future policy will be based. So what does a Conservative Party stand for? What's the direction it wants to take our country? And then start from that basis and then define policy underneath it. And the example I used was actually where the Labour Party are now, because whether you agree with the strategy the Labour Party has adopted since coming to government, you can see what it is, and you can see that the decision making underpins that strategy, and it's all about effectively, getting the economy in order and making economic growth happen. And there's a reality that they will live or die by whether they achieve that. And the big danger is Keir Starmer becomes so unpopular that he can't be recovered, that he can't recover. But if he starts to deliver that strategy and he can demonstrate absolutely and clearly that his strategy is delivering because of the policies he put in place, a lot of people will turn around. I think that that's where we are. The issue is whether he can do that, and I'm not sure he can.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, it's a difficult one because also, I said those political parties as an institution have an important sort of role in politics and are always going to.
Yeah. You can't have a political system without it. People will always align themselves, and you see this within independents that, you get a broad group of independents at a council, and 8 or 9 times out of 10, those independents join together and form some sort of coalition. And that in effect is a party system. They may manage it slightly differently, but that does happen, and that's not a criticism. You achieve more by doing that and by working with others as politicians, and so of course you're going to do that.
The major reason that happens, though, is because the system forces you to join into groups. Because if you get elected as an independent, as a single independent, you don't get any committee privileges, and basically you end up turning up to 4 county council meetings a year because you can't be involved in anything. And so you, as an independent, you're forced to join together with other people. It doesn't have to be independents, because I think in Cambridge City there's independents and Greens, for example, to have any degree of influence, and that's part of the problem as well.
Okay. But where wouldn't that be the case? That any sort of body where you're going to choose people in some way to fulfill particular roles. Now, you're going to have some sort of group of some description. Now, it might not be a political party in the way we conceive of it, but you're going to have a sort of system of some variety to allocate different roles within that body.
You are one way or another, but I do get the point that Stephen's making, and that it's something that we need to think about how independents fit into the system, because there is also a role for independents, and but even then, informally, independents will work together, even if they don't form a group, even if you get that structure right, so independents are given a role on committees and certain things, they will still work together.
I mean, you can. I mean, I actually don't think it's the biggest problem in the world to have a technical group of independents.
Neither do I. I don't have a problem with it at all. My only thing about it is that when you start to formalise that beyond councils and into elections, where you form, independent groups to stand as an election for election, by and large, where those people move to a position of power, they. I wouldn't say by and large, but often they fail. And I would cite Uttlesford as an example of that, where I think the council is, and funnily enough, Kemi Badenoch's constituency as well. But residents for Uttlesford, they're effectively elected on the basis of stopping development. They haven't stopped development. They have cost the council a lot of money, and I mean a lot of money. Not everything about them is bad, but I'm not sure they're a force for good in Uttlesford.
Yeah.
I've got to go to work, chaps.
Yeah, I've actually got to go and get my bus. All right. Lovely to see everybody. Thank you, everyone, for joining into what has become David's political therapy session. And we'll see everybody next week.
Happy New Year. Last time I'm going to say it. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.